Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another world. Today, we'll be focusing on a recent fantasy novel that's generating quite a bit of buzz. We'll be exploring its characters, their motivations, and some key plot points, just to give you a sense of the story's arc.
I have to say, the world building in this one is pretty impressive. But what really grabbed me was the character development.
Yeah, the author really doesn't hold back when it comes to giving these characters depth, right from the get-go.
Right. Like Ethan, our 18-year-old swordsman. You'd think, okay, typical hero, but then boom, he's completely disillusioned with the nobility and the corruption in his society.
Talk about a recipe for rebellion. He's not just some privileged kid playing with a sword. What did you think about his motivations?
Well, it's clear he's got this deep-seated yearning for justice and equality, a desire to see the world become a better place.
Almost like a Robin Hood kind of vibe.
Definitely. But he's also afraid of failing to live up to those ideals. He's got this fear of powerlessness and of betraying the people he cares about.
That's a heavy burden for an 18-year-old to carry, especially when he's got a 300-year-old sorceress, Maeve, as his mentor. I mean, talk about a generation gap.
Yeah. But think about the kind of wisdom she must have accumulated over 3 centuries. And she seems to represent that balance between magic and nature, the kind of harmony this world needs.
But she's got her own fears, too, right? The source material mentions something about her fear of magic being misused.
Yeah. It's like she's seen firsthand how power can corrupt. She carries the weight of knowing how easily things can go wrong, how magic can be twisted for destructive purposes.
It's like she's a guardian trying to protect not just the world, but also the future of magic itself.
Exactly. And then we have Aric, our 25-year-old necromancer. That's not a character type you see every day.
Definitely not your typical good guy. What were your thoughts on his portrayal?
Well, necromancy is always tricky in fantasy. It walks that line between life and death, and it's often associated with, the darker side of magic.
Definitely has that forbidden magic vibe.
Right. And Aric, well, he's ambitious and power-hungry, but there's a twist.
Go on.
He fears being thwarted. It's like he's driven by this need to succeed, this underlying fear of failure. So maybe there's more to him than meets the eye.
Oh, I like where you're going with this. Like, he's not just a straight-up villain. Maybe there's a reason behind his ambition, something deeper we haven't uncovered yet.
Exactly. He could be one of those morally gray characters we love to hate. And speaking of intriguing characters, we've got 2 others who pop up. Lyra and the Shadow Lord.
Yeah, they're not in the spotlight yet, but I have a feeling they'll play a big role as the story unfolds, especially Lyra, who's on this mysterious journey.
The source material doesn't give us a ton to go on, but it's clear she's searching for something. And the Shadow Lord, well, he's shrouded in mystery, a looming presence we know very little about.
It's like the author is deliberately keeping us in the dark, dropping these little hints to pique our curiosity.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's this intriguing element, the heart of the forest. It's mentioned as this almost mythical entity or place.
It sounded like more than just a landmark, like it holds some kind of power.
Yeah, it's described as having restorative powers, like it's the life force of the world.
So it's not just about, like, healing individuals, it's about the balance of nature, the very essence of this world's survival.
You got it. And the quest to find it seems to be a central part of the plot. We know that both Lyra and Ethan are involved.
And if we consider their individual fears, Ethan's fear of powerlessness, Maeve's fear of magic misused this journey could be the ultimate test for them.
For sure. It's like they're each being pushed to confront their deepest fears while also facing this external threat that could destroy everything. Talk about high stakes.
High stakes indeed. But before we delve deeper into that, there's this one scene with Lyra that I can't get out of my head.
You mean the cave scene?
With the sword?
That's the
Yeah.
one. It's like something out of a classic hero's journey. She stumbles upon this magical sword, and it just feels so symbolic.
Definitely. It could represent so many things. Her inner strength, her destiny, her role in the fight against the Shadow Lord. It's like the author is saying, hey, this young woman is about to become a force to be reckoned with.
I love that. So we've got these compelling characters, their personal struggles, and a world on the brink of chaos. But how does the author establish the Shadow Lord as a legitimate threat? I mean, we barely know anything about him.
Right, but the language used to describe him, it's chilling. Darkness, malevolence, a threat to the world's balance. It creates this sense of impending doom.
It's like he's not just a villain. He's the embodiment of everything that threatens this world. a force of nature almost.
Yeah, like a primal force, a symbol of the chaos that could consume everything. It sends shivers down my spine just thinking about it. But even with all this darkness, the author hints at these themes of resilience and hope. I'm really curious to see how those play out.
Me too. It's like even in the darkest of times, there's this flicker of light, this belief that things can get better.
And that's what keeps us turning the pages, right? That hope that even when things seem impossible, there's always a chance for light to break through.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've only scratched the surface of this world and its characters.
There's so much more to unravel, so many layers to explore, but we'll save that for our next deep dive. It's like the Shadow Lord is this ultimate bad guy, but the story isn't just about fighting him, right? I mean, the characters themselves, they each have these internal battles going on too.
Yeah, it's like their own personal journeys are mirroring that big conflict with the Shadow Lord, that struggle between darkness and light.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Even in a world with magic and mythical creatures, it's the human stuff, the internal stuff, that really gets to you. Like Lyra, for example. She starts out on this journey and she's kind of lost, uncertain.
Totally. She represents that feeling we all get when we're facing something new, that sense of where do I even begin?
Exactly. And then she finds that magical sword. That felt like more than just, oh, cool, a new weapon.
Oh, yeah, way more. It's like she's literally finding the strength within herself,
Yeah.
Like that sword represents her potential, her power waiting to be unleashed.
Totally. And if we think about Ethan and his fear of being powerless, maybe his journey is about learning to use his own strength, too. And not just physical strength, but the strength to stand up for what he believes in.
That's a good point. It's like he needs to learn how to wield his convictions, his beliefs, as powerfully as he wields his sword. So it's not just about muscles, it's about moral courage, too.
Right. Standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. I love that. These characters are not just running around having adventures, they're wrestling with some pretty deep stuff. What about Maeve, though? I mean, she's got power and wisdom for sure, but she's also got, like, centuries of baggage, right?
Right. She's seen it all,
Yeah.
But she's still fighting for a better future, even if it's in a different way.
By guiding others, teaching, mentoring, it's a quieter kind of heroism, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like her biggest battle is against giving up, against becoming cynical after seeing so much darkness. Instead, she's like, okay, I'm going to pass on what I've learned. Maybe the next generation can do better.
Pretty powerful when you think about it. She's like, I've made mistakes, but we can still make things better.
Okay, but what about Aric, our necromancer? He's definitely not a good guy, but do you think the author is setting him up for, like, a redemption arc?
I don't know. The source material is kind of vague about his whole deal, but there are these hints that he's not completely heartless.
Like that fear of being thwarted?
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe under all that ambition and power grabbing, there's a part of him that's afraid of failing. Could that lead him to change? Maybe.
I mean, he's definitely got more depth than your typical evil wizard trope. Oh, and remember that line about how he hides his true intentions behind all that charm and charisma? So good.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, is he really evil or is he just playing a part? Is he manipulating people for some bigger goal? What is he even after?
These are the questions that keep you hooked. Okay, but let's get back to the Shadow Lord for a minute. We've talked about him as this force of darkness, but is he more than that? Is there more to him than just being the bad guy? Well, the source material doesn't give us a ton to go on, but what it does say is pretty interesting. Like, the author uses these almost mythic terms to describe him, right? Darkness, malevolent, a threat to the balance of the world.
Okay, yeah, it's not just like, oh, this guy is evil. It's deeper than that, right?
Right. It's like he represents something much older, something primal, like the embodiment of chaos itself.
Wow. Okay, now I'm getting chills. So he's not just some random villain. He's like the opposite of the heart of the forest, the opposite of life and restoration.
Exactly. It's like he's trying to destroy the very essence of life, to mess up the natural order of everything.
Okay, that takes things to a whole other level. It's not just good versus evil anymore. It's about the survival of the entire world.
And it's about these characters being caught in the middle of it, which is where those themes of resilience and hope come in. I mean, they're facing this enemy that wants to destroy literally everything.
But they're still fighting, still holding on to hope.
And that's what makes the story so powerful, right? Even when things are super dark, there's always that possibility that light will win out. It's a classic struggle, but it never gets old.
And this author, they're doing such a good job of making it feel new, you know? It's not just a rehash of the same old story. These characters, they're complex, and the world they live in, it feels real. I'm hooked.
Me too. But we're only halfway through our deep dive. There's still so much more to uncover.
So we've got this whole battle between light and darkness going on, right? But I keep thinking about those little moments, the ones where the characters just connect with each other like human beings. What about you? Did any of those scenes stand out?
Well, yeah, actually, what I found really interesting was how the author, balances those huge epic events
Uh,
with the smaller, more personal stuff.
hmm
Like there's that scene with Lyra and Ethan right there just sitting by the campfire,
Hmm.
totally wiped out from their journey, but they're still talking about their hopes for the future, imagining what the world would be like without the Shadow Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that part. It's such a small moment, but it's like even when everything's falling apart, they still believe that things can get better.
Exactly. It shows their resilience,
Yeah.
you know? Like even when things are tough, they don't give up hope. And there's that other scene, I love that one, where Lyra tells Ethan about her doubts and he's like, "Hey, we'll figure it out together."
Yeah, I love that line. It's so simple, but it says so much about how important their connection is,
Totally.
right?
It's like their bond is what gives them strength.
Yeah.
And it's not just romantic love either. There's that part where Maeve shares a story with Lyra about her own past, like a story about loss and heartbreak, but also about how hope can survive even the toughest times.
Oh, man. Yeah. That scene gets me every time. It's like Maeve's been through so much, but she still believes in something better. And she's passing that belief on to Lyra, like, hey, kid, I've been there. It sucks, but you got to keep going.
I know, right? It's like she's sharing a piece of her wisdom, her strength. And speaking of strength, what about Aric? I mean, we've been speculating about him this whole time about whether he could redeem himself. Did you find anything in the source material that kind of hints at that?
Well, yeah. There's that scene where he's standing on a cliff overlooking a battlefield, and the author describes him as being caught between shadow and light. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. And his expression is like totally unreadable. You can't tell what he's thinking or feeling. It's like he's literally standing on the edge,
Yeah.
deciding which way to go.
Oh, so good. It's like he's got this internal battle raging inside him, and the choice he makes, it could change everything.
Right. The fate of the whole world might depend on what Aric decides to do. Okay, so we've got these amazing characters, right? Their destinies are all tangled up together
Mm.
in this world that's hanging by a thread. But even with all that darkness, there's still this sense of hope and resilience and the importance of human connection. So what do you think? What's the message behind all this? What's the author trying to say?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think it's about the choices we make. You know, even when things are really, really bad, we still have the power to choose hope, to choose love, to fight for what we believe in.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's a story about facing darkness but not letting it consume you. It's about finding strength in each other and never giving up on the possibility of a better future.
So well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. What kind of ending do you think would be most satisfying for this story? Would you want a clear victory of good over evil, a bittersweet resolution, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts. And thanks for joining us on this epic exploration. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the worlds of fantasy and imagination.